listen to me speak. I've done multiple B-sides, but this is my first official, HackerCon, so I'm a little nervous, I'll admit it. I'm here trying to get through this. So, once again, thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about 3 new techniques. New is in quotes because really I'm not talking about anything new. It's really about, let's see better ways of maybe doing some things we do with automated tools right now. Before I start, my name is Eric Kuehn, not Kuhn, but I'll answer to that anyways. But Kuehn, I'm one of the principal security consultants with Secure Ideas. We are a consulting firm. We work with a large number of clients, big, small, enterprise, etc. Based out of Jacksonville, I work out of the Charlotte area myself. Been there for 7 years. Before I started with Secure Ideas, I was lucky enough to be responsible for some very large Active Directory environments, the infrastructure. One for a very, very large financial institution out of Charlotte, the other an entertainment company down in Orlando. So I've been able to deal with Active Directory since before it was officially released. My focus is really around Windows systems, Active Directory, of course. Now I do pen testing, security consulting, training, etc. Other interesting facts, I love movies. I was actually a film major in college, found out that wouldn't work for me, moved into IT because of a friend of mine and kind of stuck with it. I love playing games, probably like most of you in here, all sorts of different games. Father of 4, which means now that 3 of my kids are going to be in college soon, I might actually be able to start playing games again, but we'll see how that goes. Well, that is absolutely, yeah, that's true. If I can still afford it after paying for 3 to 4 kids in college at one time. Since you're here, I'm assuming you know what Active Directory is, but just in case you don't, it is the underlying authentication and authorization source for Windows environments, on-prem Windows environments. If the environment's been around for any amount of time, more than like the last 2 years, and has any size, they're probably using AD behind the scenes. This is clearly what attackers want to gain access to. As soon as you compromise it, you own everything. Now, as a pen tester, which is one of my main things, I do want to try and get domain admin, but that's not always a requirement, right? Domain admin lets us do whatever we want. We can become whoever we want. We can move around. But as we're going through this and we're trying to think about where we want to get to, because that's where our client is holding their information, we need to remember that domain admin isn't always the end-all be-all. It's great, but sometimes I just need to get SQL administrator. So important fact and thing to remember. There are so many tools out there right now. Hacking AD is typically fairly easy, right? We've had tools being built for the last 8, 9, 10 years that do incredible work, right? Often they're not detected. Or is that true anymore? Not really. I have some of our favorites, right? IAMPacket, I think everybody who does anything with Kali or Linux uses this all the time behind the scenes. Certify, so you can abuse those certificates, great way of getting information. NetExec, which replaced CrackMapExec, I said it right that time. Another great tool to start seeing what's on Windows environments, etc. And then, of course, we have 2 of the biggies down there for gathering information, Bloodhound and Avalanche. Bloodhound, I admit, when I started 7 years ago, because I just left being an infrastructure guy, I didn't want to use Bloodhound. I wanted to be a purist. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to start searching manually. It takes a lot of time, right? Bloodhound is a great tool. The problem is it gets detected. I'm not even talking about endpoint protection detecting. I mean the systems in the background. Defender for Identity is going to see you immediately and pick on you and say somebody is doing something strange, because all of these tools behave in very specific ways. As we heard yesterday in multiple talks, people are building machine learning platforms to detect you. They're using malicious data to detect you. Bloodhound works in a very specific way and is easy to detect. Same as Avalanche. If you want to know how it runs, you just go to the GitHub repo. You can see the specific queries it's running behind the scenes and build tools to see what it is doing. Right? And then, of course, we have Mimikatz, every AD administrator's nightmare. Everything detects it all the time, no problem. Yes, you can do things to make it harder, but once again, it's working in very specific ways. On top of that, who is familiar with the changes Microsoft made to Kerberos, SMB, et cetera, over the last year? All right, we have at least one person. With you seeing that, how many of your clients or your organizations are actively looking for the new events that are created in the system event log, not the security event log, that says somebody is trying to do something funny with Kerberos, either through a certificate or through Kerberos itself. Anybody? Hopefully, no, probably not. If you are, boy, are you going to see all sorts of interesting things as soon as somebody, maybe a junior pen tester or someone is on the network and starts doing all of the default things that you see in TTPs out there online. Right, here's how you created a fake Kerberos ticket with Mimikatz, but we didn't tell you need to include these other items. Oops, immediately flagged on a domain controller, immediately picked up. Same with certificates. On top of that, even if you found a way to bypass those things, which there is some documentation out there, Microsoft just released another patch last month that is making it even more difficult to start forging Kerberos tickets. This is great. Defense, very important. We always have this running battle. We were talking about this yesterday. Attackers have great tools. Defenders have great detection, right? Right now, defenders are winning in a lot of cases, not all the time. So we, as pen testers, maybe shouldn't be relying on these tools as much as we do, right? The best way to stay undetected on a network is to pretend to be a user or an administrator. As soon as you do that, it is much harder to detect you. So why focus on this? Why don't we look at some of these old utilities that have been built into Microsoft since forever, in the NT days and newer, that do the same thing? The first one up here, Net. I'm going to admit, if you use NetEXE, you're going to get detected, right? And so I don't even want to talk about it too much, but sometimes it's the only thing you have, okay? Yes, as soon as you say net groups, every EDR known to man is going to flag you as malicious, and you're done. But it's still there. It's built into every Windows box, known to man, forever. It will let you get information about accounts, groups, etc. Right? Very easy to use. Downside, it does need to be part of the domain. So you can't do this. Once again, I'm a consultant. I have one up on most of your internal red teams. I get to bring my own box with me and plug it onto your network. It's trusted by me, not you, but it's there and it's considered trusted because you've allowed it on your network. Net doesn't work for me because I'm not in your domain. But as soon as I can get out one of your boxes because I got credentials somehow, we start doing things. That somehow is nebulous, but often very easy compared to staying away and not getting it. So, don't use net, but if you have to, some quick reference material. I really don't want to spend too much time here because, as I said, it's going to flag you immediately. The important part is don't forget to add domain to the end of what you do, otherwise you're messing with the local box, not getting what you want. Next best utility, and the one probably everybody defaults to, LDAP. This is probably still one of the best ways to communicate with AD. It's an LDAP directory. LDAP has been around far longer than AD has been there. How many people started with NetWare? Yeah, how many did NetWare 4? 5? 6? No, okay. I got to go through all of that before we moved to Windows. So LDAP has been around forever. The biggest benefit to LDAP is it is a default port that must be open to all Windows devices on your network for the domain to function. I don't need to have anything special. I don't need to be worried about it being firewalled off. It's there. It's open. We can communicate with it. It allows multiple ways to authenticate to it. I don't need to be part of the domain to use this. I just need a set of credentials. So we can use my box, yet again, where I can run all my utilities and you'll never see them with endpoint protection. There are lots of tools and programs out there that will do searches for you, help you do searches. It's not Windows specific, so if you know LDAP for AD, you can use it against like maybe that VMware, vSphere LDAP directory that's created, or some other internal one that you find out there that is being used by the company. And once again, LDAP allows for multiple authentication protocols, NTLM, Kerberos, LDAP itself, lots of options. The cons. You need to understand the LDAP syntax, which is not necessarily intuitive. You have parentheses everywhere, stars, equals, ampersands. it's good to have a good set of filters out there. There's many utilities that you can go to that will list it. Microsoft has one from 2003 that still holds true today. Another big problem is that it may not return all of the results to you depending on the tool. LDAP has this thing limiting how many objects, how many pieces of information it will return unless you say, okay, I know that there's more than 2,000 objects here. Please give them all to me. It's called page size. Next biggest problem is that the values from Active Directory may not actually mean anything to you because they're numbers or there's some strange character sequence, whatever it might be. You have to do a lot of translation back and forth at times. And the last thing to think about, at least as somebody trying to be nice to your client, is that bad LDAP queries will destroy a domain controller. Domain controllers can only have so many queries running at one time. It's 4 per processor by default. So that could be 8, it could be 60, it all depends on how many processors are there. The timeout is 2 seconds. So if I write a bad query that says, give me all objects, all properties, filtering by give me somebody's description is admin, we'll just use that one. It will take forever. We're like a database. LDAP directories have indexed and non-indexed attributes. Searching a non-indexed attribute means you're doing page scans. It's taking forever. You run a whole bunch of these at once and you watch the domain controller fall over. I have never taken a client's DC down, but I have experienced this from the blue team side when I was responsible for AD, where we had this wonderful multi-node cluster that someone stood up that would run queries for us, and I watched it come on and somebody put a bad directory, bad LDAP query in there. All 2,000 nodes hit one of my domain controllers, and I just watched it literally catch on fire in the data center. It was impressive. But it's good to use. It is the best way to be there. I have a couple of examples here. The one at the bottom, which is probably the hardest one to see out there, I highlight. Find users with service principal name. Does anybody know what this is? What attack we're doing when we're using Kerber roasting? Yes, absolutely. Great way of getting some credentials and escalating, pivoting all at once. The downside is that filter, while a great filter and nicely made and will return things very quickly, will also immediately get detected by endpoint protection. Not even local. Well, it will by local as well, because it's watching what happens. A better way of doing that is actually, let me get all of the users in the environment and add the attribute of service principal name. And now I take it offline and start looking at it. Once again, we want to build our queries as if we're kind of a management software, right? Or we're doing some sort of normal thing out there in the environment. A classic one that I see for LDAP and then PowerShell, which we'll get to in a minute, is the admin count equals 1. Does anybody know what that is? No? So it's a classic way of trying to figure out what the special and privileged accounts in Active Directory are. It's tagged to anybody who's been a member of domain admins and about 8 other groups. All of them have special properties. The downside is admin count equals 1 doesn't tell you why they're special, and it gets tagged there even after you're removed from one of those special groups. You start getting fictitious data. So we want to use LDAP to do our queries. When I recommend tools, I know LDAP search is built into Linux. That is not my recommendation. I would much rather see people using things like CSVDE. Does anybody know that one? Oh, we're going way back. CSVDE is a way of writing an LDAP query on a Microsoft box, and it will export the information to you in a nice CSV file that then you could take offline and start using, right? If you're going to look at individual objects, you use something called LDP. Has anybody used LDP? Yeah, awesome. Built into Windows, right? Yes, you have to install some tools, but you can do that without rebooting. But then all of those non-human readable pieces of information, like user account control, which says if the account is enabled or if it has special logon properties, the password last set, etc., all gets translated over to something we can understand. Unfortunately, LDP doesn't export things well, but it is a great way of starting to look through pieces of information. Since I brought up CSVDE, here's a quick way of doing it. I admit we're using PowerShell here because Microsoft time is one of those strange pieces of information. That's a number. It's the it is the number of 100 millisecond intervals, nanosecond intervals since 1601. I think I got that right. 1601. 1900 is UTC, or epoch time. But all we're doing is we're saying, in this case, I want to get the Microsoft time that equates to 30 days ago. Every Windows device on your network is changing its password every 30 days. Behind the scenes, it's doing it on the self, right? I know many organizations that don't clean up Windows computer objects for some reason. If this is your organization, you need to start doing this. It is a problem if they exist. Attackers can leverage these to start doing things in your environment. Me, as somebody trying to find something out there to get the naming standard to see what is available, I only want the active ones. I don't care about the others, right? Who cares about those inactive ones right now? Let me see the current. So this is basically saying -S is the server you want to connect to, in this case a domain controller. -B is my user account, SAM account name, what we think of as the short login name. Then you supply the domain, fully qualified name. The star says, hey, prompt me for a password. Don't let me have to write this in. The R is the LDAP filter. The L, lowercase l, is the other pieces of information. So I'm saying, give me all of the active computers. I want to know their short name, their long name, which is DNS host name, and their operating system. Bam, right off the bat, I get to see a whole bunch of information in your environment. Most importantly, I get to know your naming standard so that when I join my own malicious computer to your environment, I don't leave it named Chernobog, which is my attack host. So then I have the fully built one down there. Now, here's something that many people don't remember. You can use LDAP to modify information in Active Directory. So, as soon as I get credentials that have this ability, I don't need to be on your environment. I can use LDP, and I can start making changes which may not be detected quite the same way that you're used to. It will still it will still create audit events on the DC, but I don't need to have other access. I don't need to worry about trying to defeat your endpoint protection. I don't need to worry about any number of things in your environment because I'm just going to use LDP from my box. So, wonderful way of making changes and also getting information. If you want to make mass changes in the environment, CSVDE, back here, you can change it and say, here's an input file, make all of these changes, and it will be more than willing to do it for you, as long as you have rights. It does get logged, right? So all of these are changes to Active Directory groups. The problem is how you authenticate is probably not going to be logged, especially if you do it over LDAP. So it depends on how you make that connection. So another problem with LDAP, one thing to be considerate about is that default LDAP, which is port 389, is not encrypted. So there's this option, which I'll show you in a little bit, with LDP that says, please do encrypt after we connect. Not all clients do that. And so when you connect to port 389 and do straight LDAP, you might be sending passwords in clear text. You might be doing all sorts of things in clear text that other people might start seeing. So be careful. The encrypted port is 636, but then you need certificates. It's all sorts of problematic at times. My favorite way, the PowerShell AD commandlets. This is great. This comes as part of the Active Directory RSAT tools, which you can install on a Windows 10 or 11 box by saying optional features. You can install on any Windows server without rebooting it by just adding the feature. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you don't. For me, I talk to my client before I start installing new software on their server. But once again, it's there, doesn't require a reboot, and this is trusted by Microsoft. You're using Microsoft utilities. You don't have to worry about them being flagged as malicious because it's a known quantity. Pros, finding objects is very easy. You get to see them, right, and you're doing it visually. Wrong one here. So finding objects is easy because the PowerShell commandlets return that data for you. It's already filtered in many cases. I only care about groups. I only care about users. I only care about computers, whatever it might be. It makes it very easy to find them. You can use standard PowerShell language for doing filters. If you're not a PowerShell person, it's not too bad. You just have to remember sometimes you have to use single quotes, sometimes double. Sometimes you have to use brackets. Okay, it's complicated. I admit it. It's not easy. But you can use standard PowerShell filtering. You can also fall back to your LDAP queries if you're more familiar with the LDAP syntax. It automatically returns all of the objects when you write a query. You don't have to worry about saying, I need to know if you have more than 2,000. It does it for you for free. And just like LDAP, I don't need to be part of your domain. I can use it straight from my attack host on your network, any Windows box. Downsides, I need to be able to connect to another port on your domain controllers, not one of the standard ones that have been there forever since Windows 2000. It's 9389, easy to remember because it's 389, which is LDAP, plus another number, 9389. Typically, this is going to be open to you. I say typically, I've run into some clients who filter it out, so we move back to LDAP. But you need to have access to this port on the domain controller. Most likely the tools are not going to be on that server that you compromise or that client that you compromise in the very beginning. It's okay, once again, you can just install the tools if you have administrative access. The other big problem is PowerShell is very verbose. If anybody writes PowerShell code, you know what I mean. You have to say 40 lines to do something very small at times. But once again, trusted. You can also, which I don't highlight here, but you could, for me it looks black and white. That threw me off for a second, but it's not. Okay. You can copy the actual DLL files and things across to servers without installing it. It just gives you limited access. So here are some quick commands for you. These are not all of them, right? But they are built well to give you the information. That get AD user property star at the bottom will give you every piece of information about that user account. Very good to start seeing what people are introducing in their environment. What attributes, what pieces of information do they have? Have they stored a password in clear text on their service accounts, which I have seen. I've seen it in multiple places. My least favorite is the description field. Every object has the description field added to it. It is amazing what you will see there. I have found this is my super secret network location, right? There are times where your client says, I need you to get into our CDE, our cardholder data environment. They won't tell you where it is, but it's right there. You start searching for all of the sites, which are pieces of information that tell clients where they should be going to talk to the domain controllers closest to them, and you'll see it in the description. I've seen passwords in the description field. That's horrible. I've seen, the worst thing I've ever seen, truly the worst thing I've ever seen, very heart-raking to me. I was on site. I started looking through their AD environment. I dumped all of the information that I could, including users with their description, and I saw to be let go on and a date in the description. That was terrifying to me because as a former AD administrator, I know that any utility that somebody might be using from their box to look at AD is going to return that by default. Have a nice day. So it would be easy to know if you have a job or not. I really was, you guys don't want to do this anymore. I did have the benefit of doing a test against a financial institution, and I found they had an old domain for one of their applications that was storing the password, the user ID, the account number. The list was amazing, what I found. When you get onto a client's network, look at their AD, right? And I'm not talking about dump everything. Just go out and use a utility like LDP, which I'll show in a minute, or Active Directory users and computers, which we'll get to, and just look through the structure. It is amazing how much insight you can get by where objects are stored, what descriptions they have, what's available to you. The get AD default domain password policy, very important one when you want to start doing password spraying, right? Let's make sure we stay under this limit. The other one that I don't have up here is you should look at see what the fine-grained password policy is, which fine-grained password policy, we'll go back, history time. Windows 2000, Windows 2003, you were pretty much stuck with one password policy across your entire domain. So lots of places picked 8 characters, upper, lower, maybe a number, special character, etc. 2008 R2, it got better. We have this idea of fine-grained password policies, which says these groups of users have a different password policy. As a pen tester or a non-admin, you can't see what that password policy is. You can see that it exists, so you kind of want to pull those out when you start looking to do password spraying. Then the one that everybody is always going to go for, how we can use PowerShell to add a member to the domain admins group. Very easy, just I'm running add group member. The identity is the group name and then who I want to add to it. We can also remove as we want. Very easy to do. I state it. Not everybody is aware of this, but you can use them remotely, as I said. You don't have to be part of the domain. You have multiple ways of doing it. The simplest is you add text server to your query, and it will connect to that remote server or domain. This is not only important if you're not domain joined, but if you are, if you connect to a client's environment that has multiple domains, by default, you only query the domain you're a member of. Let's go and see what that other remote domain has. You'll still be able to get the information. You just need to say, go here with text server. But then if you want to run it as different ways, you can use Kerberos tickets, use Mimikatz, do pass the ticket, pass the hash, etc. out of your own new PowerShell window. You can also do the run as net only, very good way of getting there. Lets you do all sorts of things. And then you can also store credentials in PowerShell and use -credential. For a blue teamer or somebody on the defensive side, you should never do any of that, actually, except for -server. The run as net only and the -credential stores your password in clear text in memory again. One of the protections Microsoft put in a while ago is we don't expose clear text passwords for people logged in. As soon as you do one of those behaviors or you map a drive, it's back in clear text. Please do not do administrative stuff from your workstation. Have dedicated admin devices to do that. Last one, because I said 3 and I copped out and said we have net, which I really don't think you should use. Active Directory users and computers is the 4th utility. Pros to this one, very easy to use. It's a graphical user interface. It's really old looking, right? I admit it because it was built in Windows 2000, but still very easy to use. Just don't forget, and I'll show this, as a tester, you need to go up to the view and say show advanced features, or it doesn't mean much to you. I don't know why it's the default, but that's what Microsoft chose. By default, this is the best way to see security on an individual object. You can get this information from LDAP, you can get it from PowerShell, but it is not intuitive. If you don't know SDDL, Security Descriptor Definition Language, the way of programmatically adding this to an object, it's very hard to read. You don't know exactly what it's doing, how it's connected, who it's reporting to, etc. So, best way of getting this information. Downsides. You really have to view objects individually. Yes, you can open up multiple ones on your screen, but still, it's 1, 2, 3 objects at a time. You can't use very complex queries to find objects. You're kind of really doing it manually and clicking through. And while you can kind of, sort of, in a really janky way, get ADUC to open on a domain that your box is not a member of, it's not really good. It doesn't work well. So really, you need to be joined to the domain to use it. And once again, just like the commandlets, it's probably not on a Windows host that you've compromised. So saying all that, I just want to kind of quickly show, and we all get to hope that this works because it's kind of early. Everybody was out late last night, and who knows how the demo gods are going to do today. All right. So, I admit this Windows box, it's a server, as you can't see it because it didn't want to duplicate. Let me see if I can get it to duplicate. Duplicate my screen. We can see it now? All right. So, here's my Windows server. I've compromised it. I'm lucky because the commandlets are here. I'm going to start with ADUC just to show everyone. Active Directory users and computers. If it's not here, adding it is very easy. You can do it through PowerShell, but I'm going to do it through the GUI because we're here. You just click down to Features. It is part of the RSAT tools. You say Add the Active Directory ADDS and ADLDS tools. Then don't forget to come up here and click the Group Management Policy one. We didn't talk about GPOs, not really a focus here, but this is a very important way of seeing settings that are being pushed down to clients. It's not included with the normal tools for some reason. You have to do it separately. So once again, very small lab environment, but it's very easy to see where objects are. You want to come up here and click this button. It's under View, Advanced Features. That way you can actually see things like security on these objects. We're just going to pick one random group. It might be a little small, and I apologize about that. I right-clicked it, and I said, Show me properties, and I went to Security, and I said, let's show everything down here by Advanced. And once again, it's very easy for us to see all the permissions here. We can click on them, and we can actually say, what does this mean? It will tell you, as you can see, the list of permissions is extensive and why it's hard to do this programmatically at times. We can see what happens, who can do, etc. to this group. So that's one. LDP, just ldp.exe. Very easy to use. You choose what server you want to connect to. It can be anyone on the environment, any LDAP server. You can change the port. We're using 389. You get a little bit of information which will tell you basic things about the domain, not very useful for what we're doing. You then have to bind like everything else. Since I'm on the domain, I can say the person I'm logged in as. You can also put in pieces of information to do it remotely. And here's that box about encrypting after the bind. Just like Active Directory users and computers, by going up to View Tree, we can say I want to look at the domain and see the same objects in ADUC, which is this one, but other partitions that exist on the domain controller. Configuration will hold pieces of information about networks that are in Active Directory. It will hold also all of the information that you use Certipy for is stored here as well, right? So let me see all of the certificate templates that exist, what the permissions are, what this can be used for is stored in configuration. But we're going to come back here to the domain. And so we can look at individual objects, not that important. The big one is here. Things like these parentheses, right? So it says server window, the behavior version 7. Don't know what that means by default. That's what normal LDP is going to show you, just 7. This translated it to us as 2016. Similar when we come down here to, is password complexity required? 1, that's kind of easy, yes or no, but it would translate it for you. Complex is required. But then we have these other ones. We can delete, etc. All of this is translated for you. But it's one object, mainly. We can see the tree, just like we did with Active Directory users and computers. We can do searches here. Here's that admin count. I'll say this once again. By default, it's going to show one level here. That means I'm literally searching where I am and one level below me. So we have to change that to subtree. And then you type in your query. The default is object class is star, doesn't help, but here's your admin count. And you can see it returns everything on the right, not in a very exportable manner. You can write some PowerShell script to copy paste and take this out if you want. I've done that in the past. But it will give you the information. What's a good query here? I have one written down. Because I don't want to, oh, here we go. Here's the same one that we kind of use for CSVDE, except I'm not limiting it. I'm just saying give me all of the computers, and I don't want to say star. Typically, you don't want to say star. This is what pieces of information do I return with my query. As I mentioned, bad queries kill DCs. Same with returning too much information. Not only could it kill the DC, it could also flag you in certain logs as you've written a bad or a long-running query. Once again, you look a little strange. So we only want to put the pieces of information we care about. In this case, the same thing. So same thing I did with CSVDE, but I added description here. And we could say, all right, here's the two servers. Here's the operating system, 2019. Great. You can get all of this information once again, however you want. And I'll always add description. It may not return anything, but you'd be amazed by what you'll see there. Lastly, PowerShell. All right. Let's do SA1. That's really small today. Let's change that a little bit. That's way too big, but that's okay. So once again, we see one piece of information. Doing property star on one, great. Let's see what pieces of information there are. Otherwise, I'd start limiting it down again. This is not a very interesting account, but we can see where's member of. Is he not a member of any? All right, let's do DA1.
Wait, member of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I just not see it there? I know it is. That's why I'm like, I scrolled past it. I'm like, I don't see it. There he is. Yeah, there he is. He's just a member of one group. It will list all of the groups. All of the tools out there will show you, there's a different command if you want to see nested groups, right? This is only showing direct membership. There's other ways of seeing the nested group permission, the same thing that you're doing with Bloodhound, etc. Let's do the CSVDE one, just to show you what it looks like. Did you paste for me? Of course not. I don't want to type you out. Thank you. Really? See, this is what happens when you shut off a box, not gracefully. Where's my query failing? The MS date. And was it? Thank you. Oh, it's right there. Yeah, thank you. Because it didn't clear all the way. There we go. It only had 2 entries. I've run this on places that have several 100,000 computers. It will take a little bit, but it does it very gracefully, so it won't be shown as a problem there. It just takes a little bit of time. And then, yet again, we have a new file. I didn't change my directory. Not enough coffee this morning. Which then I take and put in Excel, whatever other tool you want, start filtering things. What is another good one here? Security descriptor language. So, if we go back up here, NT security descriptor is the security on this object. Who can do something here? Once again, it doesn't show as very useful to us because it just says that it's this type of object. So we have to go through and we have to do a little bit more. Did you paste for me this time? No. The size is killing me. Thank you. Let's spell domain admins right one of these days. All right, so we can see the descriptor. We actually want to see the information in it. This is getting a little bit more PowerShell-ish, but hey, let's just return NT security descriptor. Let's just return NT security descriptor. Thank you. Then we do one more. As you can see, it's a little bit further, but this is how it returns. We can see somebody has read, cert publishers has read to a specific part of this, but we don't know exactly what that is. You have to translate the GUIDs. There are scripts out there that will do it. I created one that I have in GitHub, etc. Not easy. Why I say go back to Active Directory users and computers. I forgot to say, if there are any questions, please do ask them at any point. I would have rather had that rather than the end. But overall, the whole point is, why not just kind of have us, sweet. Why not use what's there? The tools, they're great. I use IAMPacket all the time. There are interesting points where it doesn't work. For example, there are multiple authentication IDs, user IDs for people. There is their SAM account name, which we think of as a login name. There is the user principal name, which is a longer version. Usually contains the domain name as part of it. So if my ID was Eric at, Eric, that would be the SAM account name. Eric at lab.pvt would be the UPN. If you just add a new UPN, it will take it. It will be happy to take it. If it hasn't been registered properly in the domain, Microsoft and Windows will still use it. Things such as IAMPacket, all of these other tools don't understand that as well, and it causes problems. So why not make what is old new again, right? Let's use some of these tools. Please use the AD commandlets. Once again, great way of getting information. From the blue team side, we need to be looking at the Windows System Event Log for things in the Kerberos, Key Distribution Center, Security Kerberos, and NetLogon. Those are all groups within, once again, the service event log, not the security event log, looking for errors, warnings, etc., to see strange behavior. So that's really it. I stayed at my 45 minutes, even with problems with my demo. I kind of ran through that. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, please.
So you were talking a lot about recon.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of native Windows tools to conduct common AD attacks,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any recommendations aside from confiscating tools and things like that?
So once again, all of the tools that we get information that I talked about can actually modify it as well. So I just fall back to those. They're trusted. Yes, it's going to create an event on the domain controller where you make the change. The only way to get around that is by using a different technique, DC shadow, and attacks that I'm not comfortable telling people to do. Because, okay, so when a change is made in Active Directory, the domain controller that made the change is the one that creates the audit event. There's a wonderful attack through Mimikatz and other ways where you can just inject the change as if you were a domain controller. The downside is if you mess that up and you do something wrong, you have just made a change that will be accepted by the domain and done. You got to be careful. I'm not a fan of that one. It's post-exploitation. I already own your entire environment to do it, so let's talk to my client or other people before we start seeing it. But otherwise, any of the tools, the PowerShell tools, LDAP, LDP, et cetera, can do it. For Linux, there is LDAP modify. I'm not a fan. I fall back to my Windows box and just use LDP. What else? Yes?
It sounds like it's really easy to take down the domain controller. I'm kind of new to this, but doesn't that mean you could use that as some kind of attack and like shut down the whole company or something?
Yep, so the question was, the previous question, by the way, is what utilities do you use to make changes to AD? And once again, I use the inherent ones, the same ones we're using to get information. Taking it down a DC can be done. You kind of want to be a little careful when you're connecting to a box, to a DC. By default, they run very efficiently. LDAP queries, as long as you don't make them really bad, should go through. The really bad is commensurate to how many objects are there, right? So a small environment, a bad query, inefficient query, won't cause a problem. In a very large environment, you start causing problems. So yes, you could cause a denial of service on a DC. Just have 20 to 30 devices all make that LDAP query to the box and see what happens. Something I would not do, but yes, absolutely something that could be done. What other questions? Yes, sir.
So you were mentioning that when you're using things like LDAP and you're making these modifications that it gets logged in, or it gets logged, and that your typical like EDR will detect and kind of report on them. How would you, I guess, could you kind of speak to how you would, I guess, avoid detection or kind of, kind of hide yourself from getting kicked off or noticed in that way?
Okay, so great question. How would I make changes in AD without them being noticed, right? So once again, number one, it depends on how well they are auditing the environment to begin with. So I've seen a large variety. I've seen people who log everything. I've seen people who log almost nothing. It's hard for me to say. The only way to make changes in AD and not have it be logged on the domain controller is to do something like the DC shadow and other attacks that inject them in. But once again, I find that's very dangerous. I would rather leverage an account that has the access somehow. We didn't talk about the other aspects of where are people logged in, which you can do through NetExec, you can do through other tools. All of the other things of finding your targets. I was just talking about mainly getting information out of AD. But the attack still happens the same way as it would with Bloodhound. Find where they're logged in, start using those credentials, move on from there. You still to this day will find services running on devices that are domain admin for some unknown reason. You will find domain admins that have a service principal name attached to them and then use Kerberoasting and they use a weak password. You will still find to this day LLMNR and other types of traffic that allow you to grab NTLM hashes across the network. Very easy to get these. For me, recently, the thing that has led to the most credentials, I can't believe, has been file shares on web servers where they share the web root directory because they need their admin, their developers to see it. And right there is, the connection string with something that gets me much further along. So you'll find them everywhere. But once again, to make changes and not have them be detected, you have to do something that I am not comfortable with being a former AD administrator. I don't want to take my client down. I don't want to make a mistake. What other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have a recommended resource for the PowerShell AD commandlets?
Recommended resource for the PowerShell AD commandlets. Great question. So adsecurity.org lists some. There are multiple groups out there. There's also some training developed by multiple groups that you could go to. Anti-Siphon has a couple of courses. There are places out there that will give you that information. A lot of them are documented fairly well. I have a long list. If you ever want to email me, I'll be more than happy to send it to you. I'm not here to keep secrets. Honestly, my goal is to make everybody secure so I don't have to do pen testing anymore. I like pen testing. It's fun, right? It's great. We get to see new things all the time. But once again, if everybody was secure, my kid's information would have been leaked the 12 times it already has, and one of them is 20, right? Yep. I would much rather not have that occur, or get that notification from a university that, hey, your information was leaked when you came to visit us. I would not want that. I'd rather be secure than me doing pen testing. I'll find something else to do. What else? Yes?
Just curious, which techniques can be used with Azure Active Directory domain services?
Okay, so longer one. I'll be more than happy to talk a little bit more offline about that one. But what the question was, what techniques can be used against Azure Active Directory, Entra ID, et cetera, and those services? They're different, is all I can say. It is a different environment. It works slightly differently. It all depends on where you're trying to get. Are you trying to get back on-prem? Are there things like write back? It really, using the consultant speech, it depends. I'll be more than happy to talk afterwards, though. Any other questions before I get booted? No? All right, well, thank you again for coming. Thank you, Kakalaki-Khan, for letting me talk here. I appreciate it.